Good evening, and welcome to this evening's edition of Housing, Fair, Safe, and Affordable. I'm your host tonight. My name is Pam Favreau. I am with Vermont Tenants. It's a program of CVOEO. And joining me this evening are two of my co-workers at CVOEO that I'm thrilled to have. Sitting next to me is Gillian Franks. She is with our Financial Futures program. And on the other side over there is Maribeth Seaman, and Maribeth is with our Chittenden Community Action Office's Housing Assistance Program. And we're going to talk to you tonight about something that's new and frankly pretty exciting for us. Our programs have joined forces to create a new program for CVOEO that we're calling Rent Right. And it's basically a preferred renters program. And rather than just explain what it is, we're going to tell you a little bit about kind of how it came to be. And by doing that, we'll explain what it is and why it's great. So, Maribeth, you were really early in on the conversations. I can remember them in my office years ago about this. So why don't you talk a little bit about where this idea came from and what motivated it?
Okay, all right. So I'm a housing advocate at CVOEO, and people come into my office for help with back rent, security deposits. They've got problems with their landlords. They're having a hard time finding a place to move. And over the years, we've seen that people come in with the same problems, and sometimes the same person comes in with the same problem over and over. They're often struggling to stay housed. They've got poor communication with their landlords. They're behind in their rent. They may have been evicted. They may have a history of eviction. And these short-term problems eventually turn into significant housing barriers for people who are low income. They desperately need housing, and with the housing stock that's available in our community, which is very limited, and the high rental costs, it becomes next to impossible for some people to find housing that's safe, affordable, decent housing. So when I've talked with my coworkers, we started to identify some common barriers that people come in with. And there's not that wide of a range, but they affect a lot of people. Some people have no rental history at all. This may be their first time they've ever rented. They've been doubled up. They've been sharing with their families. They've been couch surfing. And so they really have nothing to build on. Often people come in and they're having a hard time communicating with their landlords. And that often takes the form of somebody that's fallen behind in their rent. And rather than go to the landlord, talk about the problem, try to negotiate a solution, try to pay part of it, they hide. They don't answer their door, they don't answer their phones, and then it gets worse and worse. And the landlord doesn't trust them because they don't have any information. So that's the basic first step that I always tell people. Call your landlord, talk to them, tell them what you're experiencing, and see if you can work something out. Then when people move on and they're looking for a new place, if they've had these problems in the past, then they don't have a good landlord reference.
Right, references.
And new landlords check old landlords and check their references, and if they don't have them, they're going to have a hard time finding a place. Some people just have a hard time being a good neighbor. They've had problems with their neighbors. They may have the police called. They cause a lot of trouble for their landlords and their neighbors, and this follows them. They kind of get blacklisted if they've got a series of problems with their landlords. So we've talked about those problems over the years as major problems for some people, for a small category of people. These become really significant barriers. And then what we haven't talked about, of course, is the problem of money. And people have a hard time budgeting. They don't pay their rent. They pay other things first. Or they've got poor credit and they have a hard time getting into an apartment. And that's where Gillian comes in. She works with many people who have these problems.
Yes, and it's a real delight. The Financial Futures program has been helping people for about 20 years now in various different ways, and specifically in the last 12 years on managing their personal money. And we teach classes in general to people who are all facing issues with how little money they have, and teaching them to find ways to direct it into the best use for them. That doesn't mean that they have to be doing what we think is right. They have to be doing what they want to do, but making sure that the money's available to do it before they do it. And so bringing in the component of managing money and acknowledging that most of us haven't been taught how to manage our money.
Right.
Rather than assuming that they're not doing it because they don't want to, it's assuming that they're not managing it because they don't know how. And I'll tell you that I see this in various stratas of the economy. It's not just the people who are in the low to mid income. It's a lot of different people.
I'm going to sit in on your classes someday. It's absolutely not just that group. Yeah.
And so we teach some basic things in terms of setting goals. And with many of the people we've seen in Rent Right, the setting goals is getting a place to live. And then we teach tracking where the money's going so that you can decide whether it's a choice next time where it goes. And the next one is to help them work out what their credit is, because credit's an enormous component of getting a place in this economy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Credit checks are common.
So understanding what credit is, how they can fix the bad credit, and how they can establish good new credit, even in a relatively short period of time, is one of the things that we do with this. And why do we do that? Because that's what landlords are looking at.
Yes.
And we want to help both sides of this equation. We understand that our clients need a place to live, and we understand that landlords want to have good tenants. So Rent Right is really about teaching as many components as we can provide to enable people to understand what makes a good tenant and how they can be that tenant. Am I jumping ahead on this?
No,
Is
not
this
at
nailing
all.
what we want to be saying?
Absolutely.
So the three of us teach this class to people who come in to us from various different organizations, and possibly even from CVOEO. We teach this, and we're available for is it 10 hours of class that we're providing?
Right, so that's an important point, Gillian. It's not just a class, it's a course. This is not you come to in a half an hour class and, wow, you're going to be cured, and Mr. Landlord, you should really take a chance. This is an entire course we do over 5 classes plus individual work.
Yeah, we're each available individually to help people with the things that they want
Correct.
to have specifically that they may not want to bring up in class, although we've found that in our classes people are more than willing to bring up their problems so that they can get some resolution on it.
Absolutely.
Or, unfortunately, we can't say that we fix everybody's problems either.
No, but...
So they then learn to accept the problem.
And work with it.
Yeah, that is what the issue is, and how do we find a way of working with it?
Exactly.
So we're not here as a, okay, stand in our cookie mold and we're going to present you as the ideal client. We're saying, okay, this is real life. How do we make it work for you?
Absolutely. It's very well put, because that is one of the things that we've talked about from the very beginning is individualizing for the group that we're working with, and then each person within that group, and really helping them to take a look at themselves. A big part of what we do is individual assessments with each person to try to narrow down and pinpoint what's causing them to not be able to be housed. So.
And our experience, although it's limited at this point because it's a startup program, has been that the people are more than willing
Absolutely.
to adapt if they can see the value in it.
Right.
And so we've been greatly enthused by developing this so that we feel like we're giving people something of value, that they're getting out of it, that they see what they can do, and we hope that the landlords are going to see this too, because they're getting, we're not approaching this from one side or the other.
Exactly, exactly. And that's an important piece for, how we built a class and what each of these sessions cover. And so while you're covering a lot of the basic skills of being a good tenant, and you're covering how to pay the rent, I mean, that's really the bottom line in every session, pay the rent, then my program and my part in teaching it brought in the component of there are laws when you're a tenant or when you're a landlord. And, we hear a lot about tenant rights, and that is certainly something Vermont tenants will always teach. But we, every year, more and more teach tenant responsibilities. And in looking at creating this class, I was fortunate. I had 32 years of Vermont tenants data to go back and look at people we've worked with who are being evicted or at very precariously housed and at risk of being evicted. And we're able to come up with very common themes, the same way that you did, of the reasons they were being evicted. And they really all were what you'd seen as people coming in for assistance for. And what I realized looking at all those numbers is a full 75% of callers to our hotline had no idea what their rights or responsibilities were, or that there were even laws involved in this. And so my component in the rent right piece is I'm teaching a class on these are your legal responsibilities. There are clear things outlined in the Vermont statutes that say if you're a tenant, you do need to maintain your place in good working order. You can become at risk for eviction for violating city ordinances or housing codes, or disturbing neighbors or noise disturbances. And so I took those top 10 reasons people get evicted, and we take the time in this class to really teach people how to not just know that that's a law and don't cross it and don't break it, but the skills to do it a different way. If you have a bad housing history, like you were saying, because you continually have problems with your neighbors, is a good example. A lot of people don't realize that, it's me and it's the person next door and it's between us, and not realizing that disturbing your neighbors is indeed a law and it is grounds for an eviction. And so we really talk with them about conflict resolution skills and how to not get into that kind of situation and how to reach out and get some help with it before it gets bad and the landlord's involved. And so those are the kinds of things that will still be there for people one-on-one with. So we took all this combined information and we said, let's put it in a class format. And we have spent many, many months compiling a curriculum. And our curriculum covers everything you can possibly imagine. And one of the things that really interests me, I sat in on Maribeth's class in our last session, and your work on how to get an apartment, how to go and interview and things like that. And I loved your class. I really enjoyed it a lot. And I think one of the favorite things that I liked about it was both treating it as a job interview and understanding the landlord's perspective. And I would love it if you could, tell us a little bit about what's in that component of your class.
Gillian talked before about setting a goal, and for a lot of people that goal was housing, but they don't quite know how to get to that first step. And the first step is like searching the ads, identifying an apartment that's reasonable for you, and having realistic expectations of what that's going to be. How to call, how to pick up the phone and call and come across as someone that's a serious candidate for housing. People are just not sure how to do that and what they should ask. They tend to pick up the phone and spill their guts and tell everything of their rental history and about their mother and their great Aunt Sue, and we just talked about, how to present yourself. And then you go on the interview, and people are scared to death about going on interviews.
Yeah.
And and so we talked, this is a business arrangement. You don't have to be friends. You don't have to, tell your story. You have to conduct yourself in a business-like way. You're negotiating a contract, basically, with the landlord. So we talk about making a positive first impression. Easy stuff. Look at the person in the eye, shake their hands. We had a nice skit with, don't go in with inappropriate clothing. act like you're on a job interview. And we do talk about seeing things from a landlord's perspective. Everybody looks at it from their own perspective. I need housing, I need housing. But you have to look, what is the landlord looking for? They're looking for somebody that's going to pay their rent. It's pretty basic. It's going to get along, it's not going to give me a lot of trouble, and is not going to create more work for me. I just want my rent. So we talk a lot about that. We talk about managing a budget. You need to pay your rent before anything else. We talk about what it means to be a good tenant and what it means to be a good neighbor. Absolutely. And sometimes that does require some conflict resolution skills. But if they've set a goal of maintaining housing, you don't have to be friends with your landlord, you don't have to be friends with your neighbor, but you got to get along. You've got to find a way of making it work. Right. And so we spend a lot of time just on those basics.
Absolutely. And one of the goals that we're really talking about with the participants in the class that I can see the spark in their eye when we talk about it is that it's the reality that if you're coming into a situation where you may have been chronically homeless, or you've been evicted before, or you don't have good references. You're probably not applying for an apartment that is extremely upscale. I think I'll put it that way. It's not a real upscale apartment, and this is a very old housing stock. The city does a great job of inspecting and maintaining them, but the reality is, some of the apartments are not the best. And so we're really talking with people about this being 1 year out of your life once you sign that lease. And their goal is to come out of that year with maybe their first ever good landlord reference, particularly for first-time renters, people who've never rented before and have no rental history, to come out of that experience with a good reference, with a landlord that's able to say they paid the rent on time every month, they were never late. If something needed to be repaired, they told me right away so I could repair it, so there wasn't more damage to the unit. And maybe during that time they've actually done a little work on their credit score. It might be a little bit higher by that point. And so we really take the whole wraparound piece and try to look at every aspect of why people fail and to teach them. One of the components built into it is that you don't just attend the class, you graduate the class. And so that means you're attending all the classes. And we were amazed at our last session. We had very homeless people. We had people living in shelters, people camping, people living in their cars. They showed for every single class on time. They participated in every class. If there was homework, they did their homework. And then we asked them all, as part of this, to schedule a one-on-one appointment with a financial coach. And that's Gillian. And you get to then do a piece that's out of the general and into the specifics with each person. And so far, I'm hearing really great feedback about it from the people that are doing it. So, but I'm kind of curious, what exactly are you doing in those meetings?
Well, at those meetings, if they want, I pull their credit report.
Great.
Tell them how to get their own copy of it, because some landlords like to save the money, save them and the other person the money, and want to see a copy, which has its own risks, and I talk about that. Right. But I tell them how to get their own copy. I go through their credit report with them and ask them which information is valid, and suggest ways of resolving those issues if they're resolvable. And I then talk to them. I've talked a bit about it in the other parts of how to establish better credit, but I talk to them about how they might go about it. Mm-hmm. And then I sit down and say, okay, so what are your issues around money?
Right.
And if there's one thing that 15 years at CVOEO, which, the great thing about CVOEO is we never get enough money to feel like we're a long way from our clients. And so you get to be able to say, okay, so how are you going to resolve these issues? And how other people have resolved these issues. So help them in a real life way. And it's not theoretical in any form. I think that's one of the things to let people know is when you say you're signing up for 10 hours, is the three of us live the life when it's not as bad for us as it is for some of the people we're dealing with who are homeless, but we know about not having money, and we know ways of resolving it.
Right, and we're able to say, and the reason we know how to resolve it is because somewhere along the line somebody taught us these skills that nobody ever taught you.
Yeah.
And that's the nice part about the class. I mean, there's no judgment in here no matter what your history is, no matter where you're sleeping tonight. Somebody didn't teach you basic skills that you just don't get anywhere. And usually we get them from life experience, but we have people who've been in foster care. We have people who've just really never been stable. So it only makes sense that they've never learned these skills, and we get to do that.
And learning those skills doesn't happen overnight.
No, it doesn't happen overnight. But once you start using those skills and you find that they work, it's very easy to watch people go, oh, that worked. Oh, and use it. So money, your responsibilities, how to go about it, and then we all sat back and we said, what are we missing? Are we missing anything in looking at this being a course? And what we realized we're missing in this was the landlord. That was a given. We're missing the landlord. And so we really started talking about how do we help them to feel involved, and how do we try to get them on board? And that's where we kind of have subtitled Rent Right as the Preferred Renters Program. Because what we've done is we've taken a lot of information about this program, the curriculum to this program, and contact information for questions. We've done mailings out to property management companies, local landlords. I should mention we're doing this class in 3 counties. So we're doing it here in Chittenden. We're also doing it in Addison County. We're also going to do it in Franklin Grand Isle County. So we've reached out to people working in housing in other counties to help compile a list of property, housing providers in those counties, and sent the information out to them that's basically said, here's this new program, here's what we're doing. We've designed something we call a CVOEO Preferred Renters Card that when somebody graduates from our class, they get one. It is numbered, and we keep track of who has them. They're signed off on by that, and it comes with a piece of education to landlords out there to say, the people who are applying for your apartments that are presenting one of these cards, they really did earn them. They made a commitment to say, I'm going to these classes, I'm doing this work, I'm doing this follow-up. And what they've really agreed to in the first class, which I instruct, is to make the change, to look at your faults, to look at your problems. And so a big piece of this is going back out to landlords and saying, gee, this is a preferred renter's card. And if you see somebody with one and you're not sure, call, ask us about it, let us tell you what's going on.
And I want to pass on some information to you that you haven't gotten because we haven't seen each other all week. I was talking to a friend of mine last Thursday night, and she's a landlord of a duplex.
Wonderful. And?
When I was talking about this program, and she said, but basically this is what I want all my tenants to know.
Yes.
She said, I've met tenants, I've wanted to give them this information, prospective tenants, that I couldn't.
Right.
I don't have the time to do this.
Right.
So I think that there are landlords out there who want to be helping the people who are on the edge.
I agree. I absolutely
agree. And so this gives them a chance to say, okay, I can do it.
Right.
Without risking my income, because this is her income.
Exactly.
And so this is a good match for a lot of landlords.
It is. And of course, you can't work in housing, and I certainly can't work in tenant rights without we hear a lot, from landlords, oh, it's so hard to evict somebody, it's so hard to get somebody out. And, we're really just straight up front with them. This doesn't mean that if there's a problem, we can go and yank your tenant out. I mean, we can't just yank them out anymore, and then you can just yank them out. But what we can say is they know a whole lot more going in than probably anybody else you've rented to about how to be a good tenant. We give them the skills. We hope they use them.
And they've established a relationship with us. So for the next year, they can come back. If they start to get in trouble, they're unsure about things, they can always come back and we can help troubleshoot things.
Right. And one of the things that's wonderful is that, you know, we're one agency. Granted, we're a big agency, but we have a long history of working relationships with a lot of other agencies in those counties. So if we have a person that's starting to have a hard time for some reason, we can not only try to help get them back on track, but we've developed enough of a relationship to pinpoint the problem. Okay, gee, you know, you keep having neighbor problems, there's some anger stuff here, and really try to hook them in with either case management services through a different agency or, you know, whatever it happens to be, to kind of help them get it back under control. So, you know, it's not a guarantee for landlords, but I agree. I agree with your friend, and I agree with you. I would at least want to know that somebody's made the effort to learn the skills to be able to do what they, you know, want to do and be a good tenant.
So I think we're not aiming at a perfect solution. We're aiming at a better situation.
Right.
And so everybody's going to be better off with this. The tenant, the prospective tenant, is going to feel more comfortable about how they can approach things, and the prospective landlord is going to understand that while there's no guarantees, there is some better understanding of the risk on both sides. So
absolutely.
It's a win-win.
And there's a bit of a safety net underneath that person that, you know, we will do whatever we need to do to support them in succeeding in this, because that's the whole goal.
I'll tell you, I don't, we will do whatever we can do, but we can't do whatever is possible.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Catch you on that one.
We'll do whatever we can do. Absolutely. To just, because the whole goal is, and how we've framed it since class one is, this is going to be a successful experience. This is going to be a successful experience, and we want to get you there. And even if it happens to be, you know, they may have horrible neighbors, drug dealers, everything, then, you know, let's help you cope with it until this lease is up. And let's
So how do we get them into this?
And that's the piece that we're going next. So we are obviously taking referrals from caseworkers, social workers, and many different programs. We've reached out and spoken to just about every agency working with low-income people with housing problems. We are also very happy to take referrals from landlords who may have a problem tenant that you're thinking you may have to look at legal action against, but maybe not. We'd be happy to talk with them and offer them this course. We can't make them take it, but we'd be happy to try to help resolve the problem and help them learn the good skills. And basically, we're kind of in the point where we're saying, we're not going to say no to anybody. We're not guaranteeing we're going to accept everybody, but we really want the chance to people to approach us. So one of the things that you're going to see at the bottom of the screen is our phone number. And all people have to do is call. If somebody's interested in taking the course, if you're a property management company or a housing provider that wants to talk with us about working with your tenants, just...
You've got a senior who's going to move out of your house.
Yes.
Senior in high school who's going to move out of your house. This is the time for them to do it.
Yeah.
Learn it early.
Learn it early, absolutely. We are most assuredly looking at first-time renters as well. So basically, I would rather have somebody call and ask about getting in, and maybe if they're not appropriate, there's many, many other options and shorter classes and different things. Yeah. Maybe they just need the finance piece, and we can put them straight into your classes about the other ones.
Yes.
So call, absolutely. If you're really wanting to know how to do this, all you really need to do is call the number on the bottom of the screen. I think frequently Maribeth is the initial contact for it, and we take referrals, and then we sit down as a group of instructors, and we look through all the referrals, and we contact them all. We don't say our next course is December 5th at 3 o'clock. We say, okay, these people all work, so I guess we're going to do an evening class. So we try to tailor it to whatever will work best for the people that are referring to us.
And that's what we do.
That's what we do, yeah. We try
always,
to make a difference.
always try and solve a problem.
This is really exciting for us because this is really, we're moving CVOEO more and more into education. Mm-hmm. And really this is how, in the end, you win. You know, I've been saying for years, the best way to fight homelessness is to not let that person become homeless to begin with. Definitely. And so that's where we're hoping to go with this. And we think we can really have a significant impact. I certainly know our experience in that first class impacted me. I was profoundly impressed by people in that class that had never, ever had stable housing. and came into the class and said, it's time for me to learn some skills. I mean, that's out of a class person's mouth. And
So if that's you,
for us,
call us.
if that's you, call us. We would be more than happy to hook up with anybody that's interested. And the other thing is, in sort of calling us, our website is being listed, and there's information on there too as well. So thank you for joining us.